For most of the 20th century, archaeology students were taught one thing. The Clovis people were the first Americans. They arrived 13,000 years ago, crossed the Bering Land Bridge from Asia, hunted mammoths, made distinctive spear points, and they were the first. This wasn't just a theory, this was fact. It was in every textbook, every museum, every lecture hall across America. The Clovis First hypothesis. If you questioned it, your career was over. If you published evidence against it, you were laughed out of the field. For decades, archaeologists buried findings that contradicted Clovis First. They knew their reputations were at stake. They knew funding would dry up. They knew the establishment would destroy them. So they stayed quiet until 2007, when a team from the University of Oregon found something in the Oregon desert that should never have been made public. Something so shocking, so controversial, that it destroyed 80 years of accepted history, and the archaeological establishment fought to suppress it. Let me take you to South Central Oregon, the Summer Lake Basin, 220 miles southeast of Eugene, a desolate, arid region, volcanic basalt, endless sagebrush, no water for miles. But 14,000 years ago, this was a different world. There was a massive lake here, Pluvial Lake Chewaucan, formed during the Ice Age from increased precipitation. The lake rose and fell over thousands of years, and carved into the basalt ridge, about 4,120 feet elevation, are 8 shallow caves, facing west, overlooking what was once a huge body of water. These are the Paisley Caves, also called the Paisley 5 Mile Point Caves. And in 2007, University of Oregon archaeologist Dennis Jenkins was running a field school excavation there. It wasn't the first time archaeologists had dug at Paisley Caves. Back in 1938, legendary Oregon archaeologist Luther Cressman excavated the site, and he found something extraordinary. Human artifacts, bones from extinct camels, horses, giant bison, all mixed together in the same layers, which meant humans lived here alongside Ice Age megafauna before those animals went extinct. Cressman published his findings in 1940, and the archaeological community rejected them completely. Questionable excavation techniques, they said, contaminated deposits, no solid documentation. The Clovis First establishment buried Cressman's work, and for 60 years, Paisley Caves were ignored. But in 2002, Dennis Jenkins decided to try again, using state-of-the-art stratigraphic excavation techniques, GPS mapping, millimeter-level documentation, everything the 1930s team couldn't do. Jenkins and his students dug carefully, layer by layer, recording everything. And in the summer of 2007, 6 feet below the modern cave floor, they found them dried, desiccated, preserved by the arid climate, coprolites, fossilized human feces. Now I know what you're thinking. They found ancient poop, so what? Here's why this is monumental. Coprolites preserve DNA, not just any DNA, human DNA, from the digestive tract, from gut bacteria, from cells shed during digestion. And these coprolites were found in a layer, with bones from extinct animals, camel bones, horse bones, giant bison, all radiocarbon dated to over 14,000 years ago. Which meant, if those coprolites were human, if the DNA inside was authentic, then humans were in Oregon over 1,000 years before the Clovis culture. The Clovis First hypothesis would be dead. Jenkins knew what he had. He knew this was explosive, so he contacted the best ancient DNA expert in the world, Eske Willerslev, University of Copenhagen, the same geneticist who later sequenced the Anzac Clovis child's DNA, the same man who pioneered ancient DNA extraction techniques, who pulled DNA from Greenland ice cores, from Siberian permafrost, a scientist known for taking on impossible challenges. Willerslev flew to Oregon in 2004, walked into the caves, examined the deposits. I was positively surprised, Willerslev later said. Some of the animal bones still had soft tissue on them, which indicated it was a really good preservation environment. And I'm not a morphologist, but some of the coprolites looked pretty human. He took samples from the coprolites carefully, using sterile techniques, and brought them back to his lab in Denmark. For 2 years, Jenkins heard nothing. The coprolites sat in Willerslev's freezer, and while Willerslev worked on other projects, Greenland ice cores, Siberian permafrost, mammoth DNA. The coprolites were lying in my freezer for quite some time, Willerslev later admitted. Jenkins almost forgot about the whole thing. He went back to his day job at the Oregon State Museum of Natural and Cultural History, business as usual. Then, in the summer of 2006, Jenkins got an email. Willerslev wanted to know, how old are these coprolites? Because in his lab in Copenhagen, Willerslev and his colleague had come up with stunning results. 6 of the samples contained undeniably human DNA, not contamination, not modern DNA, ancient human DNA, with genetic markers found only in Native American populations. Haplogroup A, common in Siberia, found in Native Americans. Maternal lineage, passed down from mothers. This was DNA from people who came from Asia, the ancestors of modern Native Americans, just like the Clovis people, but older, much older. Willerslev sent samples to 2 independent radiocarbon dating labs, Oxford in England, and Florida in the United States, the best labs in the world for radiocarbon dating. Both labs worked blind. They didn't know what they were testing. They didn't know the significance. They just dated the organic material. And both labs came back with the same date, 14,300 years ago, give or take a few hundred years, almost 1,500 years before Clovis. Jenkins said the results were earth-shaking, and he was right. In April 2008, Jenkins and Willerslev published their findings in Science magazine, one of the most prestigious scientific journals in the world, peer-reviewed, rigorously vetted. The title, DNA from pre-Clovis human coprolites in Oregon, North America. The implications were massive. If confirmed, this meant the Clovis First hypothesis was wrong. It meant humans were in North America at least 1,500 years earlier than thought. It meant there were PRE Clovis cultures, possibly multiple waves of migration, possibly different routes. Everything we thought we knew had to be reconsidered. And the archaeological establishment lost their minds within weeks. Criticism poured in, not measured academic debate, attacks. The stratigraphy is chaotic. Cave deposits are notoriously unreliable. DNA could have leached down through sediments from later occupations. Modern contamination from rodent urine and water percolation. The coprolites aren't even human. They're probably from carnivores. Every excuse, every attack, every attempt to discredit the findings. Prominent archaeologists published formal rebuttals. They questioned the methodology, the dating, the DNA analysis, the stratigraphy. Some suggested that younger human DNA washed down through the cave sediments over time, contaminating older animal coprolites, making them appear human when they weren't. Others said the human DNA was from later occupations, that it had leached down through millennia of water flow. Still others questioned whether the coprolites were even correctly identified as human. Why? Why such fierce resistance? Because Clovis First wasn't just a theory, it was an ideology. It was careers built over decades, funding dependent on established narratives, textbooks that would need to be rewritten, museum exhibits that would need to be changed. It was 80 years of accepted dogma, professors who had taught Clovis First their entire careers, graduate students who wrote dissertations defending it, department heads whose reputations were built on it, and these coprolites from a remote cave in Oregon threatened to destroy it all. Prominent archaeologists published rebuttals. They questioned the methodology, the dating, the DNA analysis. They said water moving through the caves could have contaminated older deposits with younger DNA. They said the coprolites might be from animals, not humans. They said Jenkins got it wrong. But here's the thing. Jenkins knew this would happen. He knew the establishment would fight back. So he kept digging. From 2007 to 2011, Jenkins and his team excavated Paisley Caves relentlessly. They collected over 280 radiocarbon dates, from artifacts, coprolites, bones, sagebrush twigs, plant fibers. They mapped every layer, every stratum, every deposit. At the millimeter level, they extracted DNA from 65 different coprolites and sent samples to multiple independent labs, blind testing. No information about where samples came from. Just tell us if this is human DNA. The results confirmed. Multiple labs, multiple tests, same result. Human DNA, 14,300 years old. In 2012, Jenkins published again in Science magazine, this time with 13 co-authors from 13 different institutions. The title, Clovis Age Western Stemmed Projectile Points and Human Coprolites at the Paisley Caves. And this paper included something crucial, stone tools, Western stemmed projectile points, not Clovis points. Different shape, different flaking technique, different technology, found in the same layers as the human coprolites. Radiocarbon dated to 11,070 to 11,240 years ago. Contemporary with Clovis, or older, which meant there were two different cultures in North America at the same time. Clovis in the east and south, Western stemmed in the Pacific Northwest, and the Western stemmed people came first. Critics said that the stratigraphy in the Paisley Caves is diffuse and chaotic, Jenkins wrote. This couldn't be more wrong. The stratigraphy is well developed, clear, and ordered correctly top to bottom. No other archaeological site in the U.S. has been as thoroughly and exhaustively dated as the Paisley Caves. We've completed more than 141 new radiocarbon measurements. We have used radiocarbon dating to physically and temporally dissect the Paisley Cave strata at the millimeter level. We see no evidence that geologically younger waterborne molecules, DNA in particular, have moved downward and contaminated deeper, older coprolites. The evidence was overwhelming, but critics still wouldn't accept it. Because here's what they didn't want to admit. The Clovis First hypothesis was based on assumption, not evidence. In the 1930s, when Clovis points were first discovered in New Mexico, they were found with mammoth bones, big, impressive spear points, clearly used to hunt massive animals, and archaeologists made a leap. These must be the first Americans, the first hunters, the first culture. Why? Because earlier sites, with different technology, didn't look as sophisticated. Simple stone flakes, scrapers, crude tools. The establishment dismissed them. Not impressive enough to be the first Americans. So they ignored evidence of earlier occupation for decades. Sites like Monteverde in Chile, Meadowcroft Rock Shelter in Pennsylvania, all showing human occupation before Clovis, all dismissed as unreliable or contaminated until Paisley Caves, because Paisley Caves had something other sites didn't: human DNA, direct, undeniable proof. But the story gets even more controversial. In 2020, the team led by Lisa Marie Shalito from Newcastle University published a study in Science Advances. They used a new technique, fecal biomarker analysis, instead of relying on DNA, which critics said could be contaminated. They analyzed lipids, fats, cholesterol, bile acids, specific molecules produced in the human gut during digestion. These molecules are hydrophobic. They don't move through water. They don't leach down through sediments. They're stable over thousands of years. And they're diagnostic. Human fecal biomarkers are different from animal fecal biomarkers. You can tell if a coprolite is human just by analyzing the lipids. The team tested 3 coprolites from Paisley Caves. Samples 194 and 280, previously dated to 12,200 radiocarbon years. And the results? Unequivocally human. Without any ambiguity from the interpretation, the researchers wrote, "The coprolites are human, the DNA is human, the age is confirmed. We have been able to demonstrate that there were pre-Clovis populations present in the area of the Great Basin," Dr. Shalito said, "and resolve this debate once and for all. The Clovis First hypothesis is dead." But here's the thing nobody tells you. Even with all this evidence, even with DNA confirmation, biomarker analysis, 285 radiocarbon dates, there are still archaeologists who refuse to accept it. "There's a lot of people who don't want to believe that there's anything older than Clovis," said Pat O'Grady, a University of Oregon staff archaeologist, "and it's something that's pervasive in archaeology. There's just a lot of people that won't accept the new data." How do you argue with that? You really can't. So what did these ancient people eat? The coprolites tell us. Analysis of the plant and animal material in the feces reveals a diet of grasses, sage grouse, fish, small mammals like rodents, and extinct giant bison. They were omnivores, eating whatever they could forage or hunt, living in a world alongside Ice Age megafauna. Camels, horses, mammoths, all of which would disappear within a few thousand years. These people weren't specialized mammoth hunters like Clovis. They were generalists, adapting to their environment, using what was available. And their technology? The western stemmed points found at Paisley Caves are morphologically distinct from Clovis points. Narrow bifaces, shoulders, thicker convex bases, different flaking technique. And here's what's fascinating. Western stem technology has links to East Asia and Siberia. Late Pleistocene sites in those regions show similar tool types, which means the western stemmed people might have come directly from Asia, down the Pacific coast, not through the ice-free corridor in central Canada, a different migration route, which raises the question, were there multiple waves of migration into the Americas? Multiple groups, multiple cultures, all arriving around the same time? The answer appears to be yes. In 2007, the same year Paisley Caves coprolites were discovered, archaeologists at Cooper's Ferry in Idaho found another pre-Clovis site with western stemmed points, dated to 16,000 years ago, even older than Paisley Caves. In 2020, archaeologists at Rimrock Draw Rock Shelter near Burns, Oregon, found artifacts potentially dating to 18,000 years ago, though that date is still being debated, in sites across North and South America. Keep pushing the timeline back. Monteverde in Chile, 14,500 years old. White Sands in New Mexico, 23,000 years old. footprints in fossilized mud. Pre-Clovis sites are everywhere, once you know what to look for. But for 80 years, the establishment refused to see them. Why? Because it would have meant admitting they were wrong. It would have meant rewriting textbooks, changing museum exhibits, rethinking everything we thought we knew about the peopling of the Americas. And the academic establishment doesn't like being wrong, especially when careers and reputations are on the line. Here's what makes Paisley Caves so important. It's the only pre-Clovis site with both Western STEM technology and preserved organic material. The dry cave environment preserved coprolites, basketry, plant fibers, bone tools. At most archaeological sites, organic material decays. You're left with stone tools, which can't be radiocarbon dated directly. But at Paisley Caves, they found a bulrush fiber artifact, probably a fragment of a basket or mat, radiocarbon dated to 14,000 years ago, a pre-Clovis cultural artifact made by human hands. This gives us a direct radiocarbon age on a pre-Clovis cultural artifact, said Thomas Connolly, director of archaeological research at the University of Oregon Museum, and confirms the stratigraphic integrity of the cave sediments. In other words, the deposits aren't mixed up, the layers are intact, the dates are reliable, the evidence is solid. But wait, there's one more twist to this story. One of the fecal biomarker samples contained both human and dog lipids, which means dogs were eating human feces. Why does this matter? Because it means humans brought dogs with them to the Americas. Domesticated dogs from Asia over 14,000 years ago, which means these weren't primitive hunter-gatherers stumbling into a new continent. These were people with culture, with domesticated animals, with basketry and fiber arts, with knowledge of plants and animals, with social structures and traditions. They were sophisticated, and they've been erased from history for 80 years because the Clovis First hypothesis was more convenient. Today, the Paisley Caves are listed on the National Register of Historic Places, recognized as one of the most important archaeological sites in North America. Dennis Jenkins still runs excavations there, training new generations of archaeologists, teaching them to question assumptions, to follow the evidence, not the dogma, but the coprolites themselves, the ones with 1,300-year-old human DNA. They're stored in climate-controlled facilities, available for further testing as new technologies emerge, because this debate is far from over. New discoveries keep pushing the timeline back. New sites, new evidence, new questions. Who were the Western-stemmed people? Where exactly did they come from? How many different migration waves were there? When did humans first arrive in the Americas? 15,000 years ago? 20,000? 30,000? We don't know, but we do know. The Clovis First hypothesis was a lie that persisted for 80 years, a lie that destroyed careers, a lie that suppressed evidence, a lie that rewrote history. And here's the thing that should terrify you. If the archaeological establishment got this wrong for this long, what else are they getting wrong? What other evidence is being suppressed? What other findings are being dismissed as unreliable? Because they don't fit the narrative? Think about it. For 80 years, anyone who questioned Clovis First was destroyed. Their papers rejected, their funding cut, their reputations ruined. Luther Cressman in 1940 found evidence of pre-Clovis occupation and was ignored for 60 years. How many other archaeologists found evidence and buried it because they knew what would happen if they published? How much history has been lost because it didn't fit the accepted narrative? The coprolites from Paisley Caves are the oldest definitively dated human remains in the Western Hemisphere, 14,300 years old, found in the Oregon desert, preserved by arid conditions, analyzed by the world's best geneticists, confirmed by multiple independent labs, verified by fecal biomarker analysis. The evidence is overwhelming. The Clovis First hypothesis is dead. Pre-Clovis cultures existed. Multiple migration waves, multiple technologies. The peopling of the Americas was far more complex than we thought, and it took fossilized feces to prove it. Let that sink in. The most important archaeological discovery in North America, the evidence that destroyed 80 years of accepted history, is ancient poop. Because the establishment was looking for mammoths and spear points, they wanted big discoveries, impressive artifacts. They dismissed simple tools, small sites, humble evidence, and they missed the truth for 8 decades. So the next time someone tells you the science is settled, or experts agree, or this is established fact, remember Paisley Caves? Remember Clovis First? Remember 80 years of lies? And ask yourself, what else are they not telling us? What other evidence is sitting in boxes, waiting to be acknowledged? What other truths are being suppressed? Because if we got the first Americans wrong for 80 years, what else have we gotten wrong? And for how long? Drop your theories in the comments. What archaeological cover-up do you think is happening right now? And if you want more suppressed discoveries that changed history, hit that subscribe button, because we're just getting started.